Hello everyone, my name is Andre. Welcome to the PDHPE Pulse podcast. Recently, we got to do a deep dive with Lara Harvey, who's the head of PDHPE at Knox and an experienced and passionate educator with over 2 decades of classroom experience. We had an incredible conversation about literacy and PDHPE and how to enhance literacy through the PDHPE course. She brings a strong background in curriculum leadership, having led whole school study skill initiatives in collaboration with the AIS and worked closely with Aero to embed literacy and writing practices that strengthen students' writing skills and contribute to improved NAPLAN results. Lara is an experienced HSC marker with a proven track record of high student achievement. She has consistently attracted strong enrollments in senior PDHPE courses through the development of effective teaching routines and a collaborative team culture. A strong advocate of lifelong learning, Lara has recently completed a master's degree in educational leadership at UNSW. She is deeply committed to inclusive education and strongly believes in the vital connection between student well-being and academic success. We had a great conversation. Here it is. Hello everyone, my name is Andre and welcome to the PDHPE Pulse podcast. We are today joined with the wonderful Lara Harvey. Lara, how are you going?
I am fantastic, thank you. And thank you so much for having me to talk about writing and literacy enhancement in PDHPE. Very excited, Andre, to have this conversation today.
Absolutely. And thank you for being on the show. And considering we are recording just after the end of term 4, so I'm very appreciative of the time. Particularly the end of term 4 feels. We all feel that. We all know exactly what that's like. So thank you very much for making the time. Let's get straight into it. So PDHPE teachers, our space is generally movement, but I think one of the biggest underrated spaces that we do not discuss or we really don't shine a light on in the early years, particularly in 7 to 10, is literacy. I think literacy is definitely not covered as extensively, say, in stage 6, 11, and 12. What's your space in literacy in PDHPE, and what's inspired you to really look at literacy in health education?
Yeah, great question. To really delve into what was my inspiration for kind of really working on this last 3 or 4 years really is my passion for developing literacy is it kind of grew out of classroom practice. I think year after year, I noticed that while my students were excellent in terms of their verbal skills, many struggled to express their ideas clearly in writing. And I think as teachers, we're always looking for ways, you know, to support students in areas where they need growth. And I could really see a gap within my students' writing and where they should be. And unfortunately, it was, you know, a lot lower level than what was expected, and in a fantastic school as well, with great access to fantastic teachers and resources. I felt it was an opportunity and a responsibility as a teacher to start looking at explicitly developing writing within my subject area. And I also think, you know, now is a time more than ever where our students are not practicing this skill set. If we look at the world they're growing up in, there's such a heavy emphasis on visual. So films, TikTok, social media. We know that our students, and research tells us that our students are reading less than ever, and that's another real problem. So writing has a real emphasis in developing writing skills more than ever. And our students, and what we've really tried to get across to our students when we've been taking part in this project, is it all starts with writing. You know, films still have scripts, ideas require proposals in whatever job they go into. And regardless of the platform, students are still assessed in written exams. For PDHPE, the HSC, it's a written exam. It's 3 hours of writing. And I feel that skill has been lost. And especially as an educator, it's not one that I have had a big emphasis on, apart from the last, 3 years. And I think apart from what I'm seeing from my students' research as well, consistently highlights that reading and writing is an essential survival skill, but it's one that really is not looked at across the curriculum, especially in our younger students. It's a heavy emphasis in primary school, but as soon as they get to year 7, it can be lost.
Absolutely. And you're, exactly right. It is, the more we embrace technology, and I think, it has its merits. I feel that we are losing some of those skills of pen to paper, which is for the rest of their life, that is something that they'll need to use, that technique of communicating their thoughts and ideas onto pen and paper. I bet you've had situations where you've had students that can articulate some ideas to you, but when you ask them to put it to pen and paper, there's just a big question mark.
Yeah, 100%. And what I was seeing in the classroom is, as I've mentioned earlier, verbally, students can actually express what they want to say very well, but when it comes to writing that down, and when it comes to assessments, and especially as the students progress into their senior years, they actually can't articulate their ideas onto paper because they just don't practice it enough. There's not exposure to it in the classroom, and a lot of the time, unfortunately, and I know that there's a fault of mine as an educator in the past, that we leave it up to English teachers. We'll say, well, it's covered in English, why should we explicitly teach it in PDHPE? But the problem with our students is they don't know what good writing looks like within subjects, specific individual subjects. And that's really where the passion for this project came from, is it, doing a disservice to my students in not giving them access to what that would look like in PDHP. And, even for a year 7 student, at the end of the year, we give them an exam with key terms like explain, describe, compare, but we never give them exposure to what that looks like. And really, that's where the problem lies.
Absolutely. And I can admit fault to that as well. When we look at those writing techniques, I sometimes fail to scaffold those responses.
Yeah.
If you need to explain something, I've had this expectation as well that, it's been taught in English, it's been taught in history, where it is in those specific domains. I think we can all agree that we fall into those trap holes, which is glad you're here, which is why I'm thrilled you're here, because we can discuss this. Now, you've mentioned some of your research. I'm really interested to hear what research you've been involved in this realm.
Yeah, sure. So the research, I'm currently, I've just finished actually my master's in educational leadership, and a part of that started about 2.5 years ago, but one of the modules really discussed the gap in students, especially within secondary. NAPLAN results tell us that reading literacy skills are extremely low in some areas and not where they should be. So that highlighted an area for me as well. But also, this project actually came about from AERO. So if, the Australian Education Research Organisation, if teachers haven't accessed their data and research and really want some convincing that this is an area where we need to pay attention, it's that research that really drove this project. So my wonderful head of department in English, she's actually at Knox, where I'm going next, Kylie, she approached 4 departments at Queenwood and asked us to engage in this research. And really, I didn't have, apart from what I had covered in my master's, I didn't have a real understanding or scope about the need for developing literacy across curriculums. And AERO's research, and it's heavily available online, really demonstrates the statistics and numbers around the current state of students' writing and literacy levels within New South Wales, and it is not where it should be. And when students get to secondary, due to lack of exposure, those statistics tell us that this is really an area of need. So our school was fortunate to engage in a year's project with AERO, where they came into our school throughout the year and developed and worked with us on professional development. And they really highlighted the need to develop this skill set across curriculums. And there was 4 departments involved in that. So really the drive for the why and how important this was to include in our curriculum came from AERO's research And they have, I think it's, correct me if I'm wrong on this, I think they had 10,000 schools worth of statistics on current writing and reading levels and NAPLAN results. And NAPLAN is not the be all and end all. It doesn't tell us everything, but it gives us a pretty good idea of where we are as a state in terms of our levels of literacy. So yeah, I mean, you can't argue with statistics in a lot of ways. So that was the driving force. And then we did a lot of internal data with our students, and what came out of that, number one, was teachers were not confident in delivering literacy and writing skills. That's why it wasn't being taught across curriculum. So one of their areas was to upskill teachers, including myself. And also through the research, our students, a lot of our students were not getting the results that they should within the NAPLAN. So that was the driving force, really.
And we all know that data drives informed teaching, data drives change. And I think, like you're saying, change is needed, especially when it comes to literacy. When we're looking at PDHP, what does literacy actually look like in the classroom? I think we and other PDHP teachers would know what it looks like, but for the general population, what should literacy look like in a PDHP classroom? And let's start with, secondary.
Yeah, I think I do believe as well that a lot of teachers, what puts them off is they think, oh, I've got to spend a whole lesson on literacy. And, we all know that we're time poor, and curriculum constraints and changes in curriculum takes up a lot of time. But I feel for any educator out there that wants to develop this skill set we started small. So our intention within the first year was to focus on year 8. So as they were sitting NAPLAN, and we wanted to gather data on that year group. So what it looked like is I sat down with my team and we developed a scope and sequence throughout the whole year. And our focus was to just include within 4 to 5 lessons a term, 10 to 15 minutes that focused on writing or literacy within theory lessons. And the most important aspect of this was it specifically focused on the content the students were learning. So literacy wasn't an add-on. It was part of their learning. It was part of the topics that they were covering. So to give you an example, year 8 was studying culture in sport. So one of the activities, literally talking about 10 minutes, the title was putting the conjunction into culture. And as the teacher, I explicitly modeled what simple and compound sentences look like using PDHP specific content. And one of my examples was a sumo wrestler up on the board, and what a simple sentence would look like and what a compound sentence would look like. And then students, once I'd explicitly modeled what that looked like and they had examples, students would then apply those structures and write their own sentences in reference to culture in sport. So it was really interesting watching the students, because at first, when we were implementing this into their lessons, they were like, why are you teaching compound and simple sentences? We do this in English. So they already know what it looks like, but what they hadn't had access to is actually applying that to PDHP and writing within a PDHP context, but relating it to simple and compound sentences. So it was really interesting watching their first reaction. But because this was a whole school approach, as the terms went on, they got really used to that shared language within departments, because other teachers were explicitly teaching writing skills. And what was wonderful to see is you could see them applying it to all these different subjects. They had the skill set, but because it was being explicitly modeled in lots of different ways, it gave them such good access to what it would look like in different subjects. And we did survey students at the end of the year, and their feedback was really positive, because they understood that, yes, this is what a compound and simple sentence looks like. We know what it looks like in English, but this is what it looks like in PE. This is what it looks like in history. This is what it looks like in social science. So it's not about spending a whole lesson on literacy or writing. It's just 10, 15-minute snapshots within theory lessons related to the content. And we mapped it out, all the skills that we had learned within the professional development. We have mapped them out for our students, and we gave them exposure, explicit kind of instructional model of teaching. This is what it looks like. Let's do it together. And now you go off and have a go. And it worked really well. And we would spend no longer than 10, 15 minutes on a skill. And then when it got to their assessments, they had exposure to everything that they needed to do well in that assessment.
This is fantastic. And that's, I think, exactly what we want to hear, is that it sounds like you didn't start just, all right, here's everything, go. It was small, it was bite-sized, it was implemented slowly. And I think as a teacher, that sounds quite, it sounds really, really good, because as teachers, we're inundated with, okay, this change has to happen and it has to happen tomorrow. It's so pleasing to hear that it was slow, it was approached delicately. And I'm assuming you had fantastic results after that in their literacy.
Yeah, because what we started doing as well is we started marking our students within their assessments on the skills that they had learned. So we were looking at when not just modeling in class, but then applying it to their assessments. This isn't their exams. This is, their assessments. They might have 2 assessments in a year, but it was focusing on the skills that they had learned. So the students knew that they were learning a skill, and then that would be they would have exposure to that and a chance to be marked on those skills that they had learned. And like you said, small chunks, real explicit modeling of the skills that the teacher had learned from Aero. And then after we had developed year 8 for a year, we were like, right, let's start with year 7. So year 8 continued, the scope and sequence was done, and then we focused on year 7. And we're taking it down a notch with year 7 and making it a lot more basic. But once we're done year 7, you can then move on to year 9. And imagine where the students will be in terms of their writing and literacy. If you've started in year 7, you develop that skill set all the way through to year 10. They get to year 11, and the teacher isn't spending all this time, and when they're marking students' work, we're perfecting small things. And that's the difference. So really, in the long run, it's going to save you time. What it's like when you mark a student's work and you're like, I don't even know what they're talking about. This doesn't make sense. None of the paragraphs link together. What's their point? Get to the point. Even with our year 8 students, we're just finding the language and the structure is so much better. And when they're sitting exam and they've got to compare, they go, oh, I know what a compare looks like, and I know how to structure that, and I know what it would look like in a PDHP context. It's made a massive difference. And our NAPLAN results, and there's been quite a lot of media about Queenwood's NAPLAN results this year, last year, sorry, we're now moving into 2026, because they significantly went up from this project. So that's where the data really comes in to say this is making a difference. And that wasn't just from PDHP, that was explicitly teaching writing in 4 different subjects and across the school has made a massive difference in NAPLAN results. So the proof's in the pudding, right?
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people forget, particularly students, that HMS is a writing subject. There's not much. There's 0 practical in it. You have to be able to write. And I think an analogy that I've heard before is that when you're teaching literacy, it's like a chef learning to cut. You can know how to cut a piece of meat, how to cut different vegetables, but the way you go about it has to be different. It's different. Yeah. There's different techniques. There's different things you got to approach. Lara, being PE teacher, we're very tangible. So if we're sitting in a classroom with you, let's say we're sitting in year 8, what is that 15 minutes going to look like? Your students have sat down, they've got their books and pens out. What does that explicit teaching of literacy look like? So if we're going through, let's say, vocabulary and terminology that is specific to PE, what does that look like in your classroom?
Yeah, great question. I think the first thing is that you're honest with the students. So the first thing we said to our students is we are going to have a literacy and writing focus this year, and we explained why. And I also said to the students, I am not an expert in this area. This is really important to me, and it's really important that I develop your skill set. But I think they really appreciated that honesty, because you're not saying I am an expert. I'm not an English teacher. I'm a teacher that wants to improve these skills for my students and help my students. But you're also being really honest that, you know, this is something that is new for our department, and we will work together to develop that. But a student sitting in that class, first you tell them the why. So you've got to sell what you're trying to do, right? For a student sat in your lesson, the first thing you want is for them not to be lost in why they're focusing on this. So we explain to students the focus on literacy and writing and how it would help them. And then I think with a skill that has not been visited as much as it should within my lessons, we did go for a very instructional teaching method. So the first thing I would do, as I discussed earlier, we would have a visual up on the board, so putting the conjunction into culture, and I would model what a simple and compound sentence would look like, and there would be examples on the board, and we would talk through and have some discussion about, okay, what makes this a complex sentence. We used fanboys is one of the Aero's techniques that some teachers will know what I'm talking about, and I was like, where have you seen this before? And they're like, oh, we do this in English. So bringing across what the skills that they've learned in English, I would say every student within my class actually knew what a simple and compound sentence was, but the problem came with then applying it to PDHPE. So we would have some discussion about what it looked like through my examples. I would model with the students, you know, this is what a simple complex sentence would look like. And then it would be, I do, we do, and then they have a go. So then it would usually be paired work, because the nature of our classroom, some students very developed in this skill set, some not so much. So they would have some discussion about that, what they would look like. And then at the end, we would come together and I would write all the examples or some of the examples that they had come up with on the board. And we would discuss, you know, is this a complex sentence? Does this work? Does it work for our subject? And then that would be the roundup. And that kind of, you know, explicit instruction and the why are we doing this before the start of the lesson was kind of the structure of the sessions as we went on through the term. The most advanced session I think that we had is the students watched an Adam Goods documentary, and then they had to this came at the end of the term. They then had to had a kind of essay format that they had to put the skills that they had learned into a timed question response, and then we peer mark. So that would be the you know, the kind of the longest activity that we did.
That's excellent. And I think you've made that so transparent that it seems that it can be done. And as you can imagine, there are some things that we hear that are just, that's beyond our reach. That sounds so within the grasp of a genuine lesson. I love it. I love it. And I think what I like about that is that we're constantly bringing in other subjects, and PDHP has that capacity to touch on the skill sets of other subjects, whether it's science, mathematics, English, and the way they structure their responses. I think what you're doing is fantastic. Looking on hindsight, what are some of the pitfalls that you've seen, or what are some of the setbacks that you've seen having this approach of 15 minutes literacy focused?
Yeah, look, I think, you know, teachers listening to this, or many teachers, and we did get this as part of our questioning during our professional development, is teachers say they don't have time. This is taking away curriculum time, and there isn't enough time to deliver the content in the first place. And with HMS, how it's so content heavy, and even the old HSC course, it's so content heavy. And this is why, I feel that there's more flexibility within the 7 to 10 curriculum. And it has, you're not missing any content. You're putting literacy and writing skills into the content. So the students are still learning about culture and sport. They're still learning about the subject, but you've just phrased it in a different way. So you're integrating some key skills into your normal lesson. And I completely admit, before I started this project, there wasn't much interest in trying to have add-ons within my lesson. It does take work, it takes time, but we are doing our students a disservice if we don't explicitly teach a skill, because the difference that it makes, and we have seen and been at the forefront of this difference, is incredible. Students are, as I discussed very early on, and we've discussed, they're reading less, they're not writing, they're on technology all the time. So unless you give them exposure in class, because they've got, they're in your class, they have to be there, hopefully they enjoy being there, but you have this opportunity to develop this skill set in a subtle way. And I understand one of the main pitfalls, and I was exactly the same, is it's scary learning a new skill. I was not taught how to explicitly write in my university degree. I can't. And then you're going back to what you learned at school. So learning a new skill and engaging in a professional development that you have hardly any idea about is really scary. But that's where the most growth comes as an educator, is when you engage in a PD and you learn something that not only is so important, but you have the opportunity to develop your own skill set. So of course there's pitfalls. It's time with your department to sit down and go, right, what does this look like? But one of the key messages I've said to educators, I've done quite a few conferences this year for the AIS, and I've done a podcast with Aero and some webinars, is don't reinvent the wheel. I was like, I have all the resources. I've developed scope and sequences, lesson plans, reach out. Lots of educators have reached out, and I've created a Google Drive, and I've just said, here's the drive. This is all of our resources. Take what you want. You might not like some of it, but this is how we've done it. And I think that's really important as teachers, that we're not reinventing the wheel here. It's not just me that have done this. There's some amazing educators out there that will have great resources. So share those resources. And what Aero have got now online, which they didn't have when I engaged in this project, the PD that I did hands-on, they've now got all the learning modules on their website. So you can sit down, have this amazing access to how to deliver this in your classroom, and then they have booklets of what it looks like in a lesson. So I completely understand there's going to be pitfalls. It is time consuming to start, but it can't be ignored. And I think anyone that is delivering explicit writing or wants to develop explicit writing and literacy skills, the difference that it will make is it's really worth the time that you're going to put into it.
Absolutely. It's that whole idea of address the upstream issue to affect the downstream issue. And I think no matter what way we paint it, like, literacy is going to be one of the forefront of student learning. It's how they're going to interact with the world, and particularly in PE or PDH or HMS rather, particularly when they're going to see that. And it's one of those instantaneous subjects where they're going to read about something and then apply something to it straight away. I think I'm 100% with you. It's essential. It's a skill that we build. Moving on from a theory component, do you find that that's had some form of benefit in communication, addressing literacy in a practical sense, how they communicate, how they turn up to the lessons? Do you feel that there's been some impact of that, or it's more specific to the classroom?
Look, yeah, that's a difficult one because we haven't really analysed the practical concepts with literacy. I think vocabulary, absolutely, in terms of what we have done with our students, throughout this literacy and writing development is they have access to a lot more vocabulary and explicitly going into vocab for PDHP, and you can bring that into your practical lessons very easily, and I'm sure lots of educators do that anyway within the warm-up, or when you for our year 10 students that are developing coaching plans or sessions, it's not just about their ideas, but it's being able to express their ideas with others and understand, like I said earlier, if you're asked to compare a program or a fitness program, understanding what that means, it will definitely make a difference. But yeah, that's an interesting space because I think we haven't measured where it could come in within a practical component, but thinking about it, especially with HMS, there's lots of ways that you can deliver the content practically for HMS if you wanted to. And I know excursions that are happening in HMS, with the depth studies, they're going down a practical route. So that's an interesting space because can students take what they've learned within the classroom and apply it to practical? I think absolutely. But yeah, one that we've not measured yet. But I definitely think their access to key terms and vocab would be an obvious one to start delving into. Yeah.
Absolutely. Lara, also looking at teachers' time constraints and things like that, we're always on the lookout for resources. Great. The wheels are already existing. I need to collect more wheels. Where can people find these resources? Now, I know you've briefly mentioned the AIS for those teachers in independent schools and also Aero. What are some of the resources that they are offering, and what other resources can teachers find?
So first of all, if anyone listening to this wants access to what we've done, as I've said, happy to share that. And I've shared it. Lots of people have reached out through the traction that this project has got, and I've shared those resources. But yeah, Aero would be your best place to go if you wanted to implement what we've discussed in this podcast today. So on the Aero website, they have the learning modules of how to develop specific areas of literacy and writing, and they are self-paced modules. So you could do that as a department, you could do it as an individual. And although we had that hands-on, it's now available, and the modules are fantastic. They have lots of examples. It's obviously work at your own pace, and kind of stop, start. So that number one is a fantastic PD. You can get your PD hours up. Every teacher's very keen for that. They also have a fantastic resource. It's a booklet of what it looks like 7 to 10. So I've talked today about using simple and complex sentences within subject specific areas such as culture and sports. So they have that for every subject. And their PDHP booklet is very easy to read and understand and access. And we've actually used that a lot within our lesson planning. And they've also, they have webinars frequently. I mean, I took part in a webinar recently with Rebecca Birch, who was heavily involved in the project at Queenwood when it started. And we just discussed exactly what we're discussing now of what's out there for educators, and it's an endless list. And if there's something that wasn't there, I can guarantee you'd be able to access it through them, or they've I am constantly, when we were taking part in this project, Christine Jackson, who works for Aero, I would give her one of my resources and say, can you just check this? I don't know if I'm on the right lines with what I am trying to deliver in terms of my content. So even having access to experts doesn't have to be anyone from Aero. Go to your head of English and say, look, I have a real interest in developing literacy and writing, can you just check this content? And that was a key driving force in at Queenwood School. Is I would go to our head of English and say, look, can you just have a look at these resources that I've developed, because I'm not sure. I just want to make sure that, you know, they're 100% accurate. And we forget that we've got experts in our school already. So yeah, lots out there. Our first point of call was Aero and taking part in that professional development, but teachers as well have created fantastic resources. So like I said earlier, do not, you know, reinvent the wheel and think I'm going to spend endless hours creating PowerPoints and resources. It's already done.
Which is always a great thing for teachers. As you know, we're always on the lookout for new resources, and it's the time, and it's the time.
100%.
And I think previous resources within the writing space has been very generic. It's very short answers. It's very, very direct questioning, which doesn't really develop the
I
student
agree.
at all.
Yeah.
Lara, this has been fantastic. This has
thank
been
you.
absolutely fantastic. It's everything I hoped it to be. So thank you so much for your time and everything. Where can people contact you if they want to share some ideas or you know, discuss their ideas with you?
Yeah, look, Andre, a really good question. What lots of educators have done, you know, when I've presented at conferences or have taken part in webinars, is they've sent me a message on LinkedIn and just said, hey, Lara, this is my email. Can you send me access to your Google Drive? That's absolutely fine. And I'm happy. It's so good. You know, it's such a great kind of aspect of our job when we're connecting with other educators and sharing resources. And then some have offered me, oh, I've done this in this space, do you want access to this? You know, so you end up with such a great bank of resources and contacting educators about what they're doing in this space. So I'm absolutely happy for that, you know, for that to happen. And as we've discussed throughout this podcast, you know, don't reinvent the wheel. We're time poor. Our jobs, when it comes to term time, they're full on. And what's really important, and I don't think we do enough, is sharing, you know, the resources that we have, and then teachers can go, right, I like this, I want to develop that. So absolutely reach out, connect, and I'm happy to, you know, give you what we've done. We've been working on this for 3 years now, so, you know, there's lots out there and happy to share them.
Lara, you're the best. This has been so good. This has been so good.
That.
I think you've covered so much, and I think the biggest thing that you said that really resonated with me is that how do we strike a balance? And the balance is communicate with people. The balance is don't spend all your minutes changing everything. It's little bits. Like what you did. Start with a year group. Get your department, start with a year group, see how that goes, and then slowly implement it. And I think the biggest thing we've got to remember is that when we have these changes is that start small. It could, like you said, 15 minutes, 1 year group, then reflect and refine and then re-deliver as you go on. I think it's so comforting to know after this is that it's a slow process. And I think as teachers, we just want quick results. Boom, we've taught it, we've done it, move on with it.
100%. And also survey students. The most important thing is, what did the students enjoy? How could it change? And have, you know, it's important as well, even if it's just a class that you're looking at, measure the impact. And you know, you'll see the results and you'll be like, how have we not focused on this before? It makes a real difference.
Absolutely. Lara, thank you so much.
Thank you, Andre. Been a pleasure.
I will put your LinkedIn in the show notes so people can contact you if they have any ideas or want to share things with you or just get some expert advice. Lara, thank you so much.
No, thank you. It's so lovely to meet you as well.
It's been so great. This has been the PDHPE podcast. My name is Andre. You've been speaking to Lara Harvey, and we will catch you next time.